In 1541, King Henry VIII of England ordered that a Bible, the Great Bible, be placed in every church in his realm. This order came 5 years after William Tyndale, who had translated the Bible into English, declared, "Lord, open the King of England's eyes," before his death as a heretic. Henry VIII changed his mind finally about the Bible in English, but following Henry's death in 1547, the kingdom and the discussion of the Bible in English would remain in turmoil until the crowning of Elizabeth's heir, James Stuart, in 1603. Now, one of the first issues James had to deal with in his reign was how to settle religious differences between the Puritans and the bishops of the Church of England. For this reason, James convened a conference at Hampton Court, which opened on Saturday, January 14th. And here, James made it clear that he, as king, had a decisive role in the affairs of the church. James affirmed his intention to make changes that were appropriate for the church, and he is quoted as saying, "I assure you, we have not called this assembly for any innovation, for we acknowledge the government ecclesiastically as it now is, to have been approved by manifold blessings from God himself, both for the increase of the gospel and with a most happy and glorious peace. Yet, because nothing can be so absolutely ordered, but something may be added thereunto, and corruption in any state, as in the body of man, will insensibly grow, either through time or person, and because we have received many complaints since our first entrance into this kingdom, or many disorders and much disobedience to the law, with a great falling away to popery, our purpose therefore is, like a good physician, to examine and try the complaints, and fully to remove the occasion thereof, if scandalous, cure them, if dangerous." Among the topics discussed at the Hampton Court Conference were changes in church government, such as excommunication in the ecclesiastical courts, providing a fit and able ministers for Ireland. And another topic was regarding modifications to the Book of Common Prayer. But one of the biggest results from this conference was the commissioning of a new Bible translation. In his book, In the Beginning, Alistair McGrath says, "It is not clear where the proposal for a new Bible translation came from or what the underlying motivation was for it." They didn't go into it planning on asking for a new Bible translation, it just kind of came up. Yet James jumped at the idea. It seems he believed that a work of this magnitude would of course take time, thereby postponing some religious controversy for a time while this colossal work was being embarked on. What we do know from James is that he said that he had not yet to see a Bible well translated into English, and he also had an opinion of the Geneva Bible, which we've not looked at in the series, but his opinion was that of all, that of the Geneva is the worst. So James was not complimentary of the current English translations, whether it's the Great Bible, the Tyndale Bible, the Coverdale Bible, or the Geneva Bible at this time. So in the series, we were focusing on the Bible and those who played a part in the translation work, bringing it from Greek, Hebrew to English. But if you are interested in a more in-depth look at the different English Bibles, their translation processes, historical significance, let me know in the comments. And though it would take a while, there's a lot of history behind this, could potentially do that as a series in the future if you're interested. So just let me know in the comments if you're interested in that. But the translation that would come from the Hampton Court Conference would be that of the King James Version of the Bible. And it is different from previous versions as it had very strict rules in place for the translation and as to how the men involved in the translation were to handle the work. Firstly, rather than there being a singular man with some assistance from a few people, as in the case of Tyndale, this translation work was to be handled by 54 men. These 54 men were divided into 6 committees that are called companies. There are 2 companies each in Cambridge, Oxford, and Westminster, the main institutions of education at the time. Each company was assigned a different section of the Bible to translate before the translation was sent off to be conferred over by the other companies. What did each company cover? So the first Westminster Company covered Genesis through 2 Kings, and this was directed by a man that we will talk about in the future named Lancelot Andrewes. The first Cambridge Company, they did 1 Chronicles through Song of Solomon, and this was directed by Edward Lively. The First Oxford Company handled Isaiah through the end of the Old Testament, through Malachi. This was directed by John Harding. Second Cambridge Company translated the Apocrypha, and this was directed by John Duport. The Second Oxford Company, they had the Gospels, Acts, and the Book of Revelation, and the director was Thomas Ravis. The Second Westminster Company, they covered the Epistles, and the director was William Barlow. Now, before the translation work could even begin, King James approved of 15 principles of translation. There is some speculation on whether he actually drafted these 15 principles or if they were drafted by Richard Bancroft. More the evidence seems to lean towards Richard Bancroft being the one who created these rules. They were approved by King James, and then Richard Bancroft instituted them, and he was the Bishop of London in 1604. So let me tell you a little bit more about Richard Bancroft. So the following is taken from a website called King James Bible Translators. It says Richard Bancroft has been described as the supervisor and overseer of the King James Bible Translation Project and its chief director. But he was more than that. He didn't originate the idea of a new translation, and in fact he was initially skeptical of the idea. But when it was suggested to King James at Hampton Court, Bancroft countered, if every man's humor should be followed, there would be no end to translating, which we see in the case today with so many Bible translations out there. It is the case. In the end, however, he became the person perhaps more than any other responsible for its success. So he became the manager of the project, and he set out the 15 rules to guide the translators in their work. We'll read those here in just a moment. And the purpose for these rules was to ensure that each company and each translator had ownership over the final project, and the rules invited inquiry, questions, and encouraged the translators to build on the work of Tyndale, Wycliffe, Coverdale, Rogers, and others. He made sure that the translators were supported financially. This was important. They were giving up from 1604 till 1611, 7 years of their lives, so making sure they were financially cared for, and they had the necessary time to work on the project. As mentioned before, Bancroft was not fully in agreement with the idea for new translation at the beginning, and he could have scuttled the enterprise in a myriad of ways, but he chose not to, but he rather acted as a facilitator and cheerleader throughout the entire project. He had to deal with men, all of whom were highly competent and who were great in other men's eyes than their own, as Miles Smith observed. Bancroft helped keep them working harmoniously together as they pressed towards their goal, and this is a tribute not only to the men themselves, but to their leaders, Richard Bancroft being the chief. In the end, it was Richard Bancroft who had the last read and edit of the new translation, and it's said that he has changed but 14 verses of over 30,000. The King James Bible has stood for hundreds of years as the accepted English text for religious groups as diverse as high and low Anglican churches, Baptist, Lutherans, and Presbyterians. Now, the 15 translation principles that Bancroft instituted are as follows. Number 1. The ordinary Bible, read in the church, commonly called the Bishop's Bible, to be followed, and as little altered as the truth of the original will permit. 2. The names of the prophets and the holy writers, with the other names of the text, to be retained as nigh as may be, accordingly as they are vulgarly used. Vulgarly meaning commonly used. 3rd, the old ecclesiastical words to be kept, such as the word church, not to be translated congregation, etc. Number 4, when a word hath divers significations, that to be kept which hath been most commonly used by the most of the ancient fathers, being agreeable to the propriety of the place and the analogy of the faith. 5, the divisions of the chapters to be altered either not at all or as little as may be, if necessity so require. 6, no marginal notes at all to be affixed, but only for the explanation of the Hebrew or Greek words, which cannot without some circumlocution so briefly and fitly be expressed in the text. 7, such quotations of places to be marginally set down as shall serve for the fit reference of one scripture to another. 8, each particular man of each company to have the same chapter or chapters, and having translated or amended them severally by himself, where he thinketh good, all to meet together, confer what they have done, and agree for their parts what shall stand. 9. As any one company hath dispatched any one book in this manner, they shall send it to the rest, to be considered of seriously and judiciously, for his majesty is very careful in this point. 10. If any company, upon the review of the book so sent, doubt or differ upon any place, to send them word thereof, note the place, and withal send their reasons, to which if they consent not, the difference to be compounded at the general meeting, which is to be at the chief persons of each company, at the end of the work. 11. When any place of special obscurity is doubted of, letters to be directed by authority to send to any learned man in the land for his judgment of such a place. 12. Letters to be sent from every bishop to the rest of his clergy, admonishing them of this translation in hand, and to move and charge as many skillful in the tongues, and having taken pains in that kind, to send his particular observations to the company, either at Westminster, Cambridge, or Oxford. 13. The directors in each company to be the deans of Westminster and Chester for that place, and the king's professors in the Hebrew or Greek in either university. 14. These translations to be used when they agree better with the text than the Bishop's Bible, Tyndale's, Matthew's, Coverdale's, White Church's, Geneva. 15. Beside the said directors before mentioned, 3 or 4 of the most ancient and grave divines in either of the universities not employed in translating to be assigned by the Vice-Chancellor, upon conference with the rest of the heads, to be overseers of the translations, as well Hebrew as Greek, for the better observation of the 4th rule above specified. So the translators would spend the next 7 years, from 1604 till 1611, working on this translation, having discussions back and forth. What's the right word order? How should we translate this? Was Tyndale right? Was Wycliffe right? Was the Geneva Bible right? A lot of discussion happening back and forth until they finally got to a point where they were comfortable that they had translated the Bible into the English language for English-speaking people. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And of course, if you're interested in seeing a series on the different English Bible translations, let me know in the comments below, and we'll see if that's something we can do in the foreseeable future. But thanks for watching the God's Peculiar People channel.